name's Mark Yankovic. I am super excited to be talking to Nigel Topping today, who is the UK government's high-level climate champion who is driving change across businesses pretty much everywhere to help us get to net zero and below 1.5 degrees. Thank you so much for making the time. I know you are massively busy and I've got a million questions and we only have a tiny amount of time. So I gave a quick introduction and can't wait to ask about COP, but my first question's got to be 18 years in brake pads and then to the Carbon Disclosure Project and then to We Mean Business. What was that move? What is the spark?
Well, I mean, I've always been, it really is, it's a love of cold places. I mean, it's a long story, but as a, I spent a lot of time in the Arctic as a climber and mountaineer as a young man, and had a sort of real love of wild, cold places. And then as I sort of had my career in manufacturing, I was, very aware that of sort of broadly of environmental issues and then increasingly of climate change. In fact, I first came across the physical impacts of climate change in 1987 when I was on a climbing expedition and science expedition in East Greenland, and we got to where a glacier was supposed to be on a map, and it wasn't there. And we thought it messed up the navigation, and eventually realised that it was just that the glacier had retreated by, I think, 15, 20 kilometres. I mean, a lot, right? And then I took some time out after brake pads to study and think about sort of systems change and Earth systems, and I became really interested in how we can use the power of business to solve, I mean, broadly speaking, global problems, but particularly climate change. And that's, what's that, 15 years ago. So then I ended up, that's how I ended up here.
Well, I mean,
in a hotel room in Korea, jet lagged, trying to persuade Korean businesses and government to have a more ambitious NDC than the 35% that they're currently contemplating.
That's what. I mean, your diary must just be manic. 8 weeks to go. How's it going?
Yeah, 6 weeks and 5 days. Don't exaggerate. Yeah. Well, it's. I mean, actually, in many ways, going really well in terms of my role, which is working with non-state actors, so the private sector and local governments and other civil society organisations. I think we've got a huge groundswell of momentum from individuals and organisations committing to get to net zero and committing to work on resilience around the world and committing to redirect finance. I think none of it adds up to enough yet, but I think, it's been an amazing change in the last 18 months. In fact, during COVID, when you would have thought there'd been a total distraction, we've actually seen a lot more people stepping up. It's getting a lot more real. I mean, people are committing capital, not just talking about long term. And of course, the backdrop of COVID is very difficult, organisationally, economically in many countries, health-wise in large parts of the world. So the world's a crazy place right now. We've got, on the one hand, not the same sort of aligned geopolitics, but on the other hand, we don't have Donald Trump blocking the whole process and running away anymore. So yes, it's as often in life, it's a mixed bag, but I think a lot of momentum, but a lot more work to be done whatever the outcome in Glasgow, really, right? Because we are in this crucial decade where we have to really not just bend the curve, but halve emissions. So I don't think we're going to, any of us who are working on climate change are going to run out of things to do in a hurry.
No, certainly not. And I think that the main thing is, using the rubbish analogy of the rubber hitting the road, commitment's great, but it's actually doing the doing. And I think this series is all about talking to real people who are doing real things that other people can be inspired by, to go, actually, it's not just somebody else. Actually, I can jump on this journey, and that's what's critical. And in the We Mean Business, I mean, this is a bit like the whole point of this is, when I first got on the sustainability journey, it was an incredibly lonely place, and there was just nobody that I could talk to. Even today, it's still a lonely place. But We Mean Business has got collaboration that you are driving through for a long time. Are you seeing around the world and on your travels that there's much more genuine collaboration with actual businesses getting stuff done or can get stuff done?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a gradual realization that the change of the pace and scale that we need can't be done just through competition and regulation. It really does need a lot of collaboration, and so there are amazing collaborations popping up all over the place. I mean, the shipping industry is a collaboration called Getting to Zero, which is the Global Maritime Forum, and the Mission Possible, which itself is a collaboration between the Rocky Mountain Institute and the World Economic Forum and the Energy Transitions Commission and Women in Business. And the Energy Transitions Commission has got like 40 commissioners, and Women in Business is 7 organizations. So that's a huge, and then the Getting to Zero is like 100. So, and they're all aligning around I mean, a lot of what we do is publish pathways, which are kind of crowdsourced because no one really owns the pathway to zero. But what's important is to get people to converge on the same pathway. So I think that's happening a lot. And the more people converge, the less risk it is for everybody. So, like you take my favorite, EVs. I was just talking to some Japanese and UK CEOs in the power sector and the automotive sector. Nissan are now committed to being 100% electric in the early 30s. Volvo 2030, GM 2035, Mercedes aiming for 2030. All the European truck manufacturers said they'll stop producing combustion engines in 2040, the heavy trucks. So that's all sort of sometimes that's organized, Getting to Zero. Sometimes it's just sort of not converging, but it's starting to be much easier to be confident about cars being all electric by 2035 and trucks by 2040, and not yet in all the world, but you can see the direction of travel. And once markets smell that sort of convergence, things happen even faster, right? Because then capital can confidently flow to the solutions. And it drives up for the old incumbency.
And that's the scale, because the challenge for any disruptive thinker is you need funding and you need exposure, and the finance world isn't ready yet for disruptive SMEs or small players, and that's kind of where it comes out of.
Well, it is. I mean, fine. I mean, but that's if you're talking about SMEs and small players, and that's not global capital markets, right? That's angel investors and venture capitalists, and they've if you look at the amount of capital that's flowing into, say, battery technology or new proteins, alternative proteins, like whether it's lab-grown meat or vegetable alternatives, there's a lot of money flowing in there now that wasn't flowing, say, 3 or 4 years ago. So that part of the capital markets is waking up to the opportunity and feeling like it's mature enough to start investing in, and green hydrogen and other things attracting a lot of capital. So, but that tends to be bigger players, right? Because you can't really dabble in that. You've got to go straight to scale. So, I think, and there's a lot more to come. I think the biggest challenge on finance is emerging markets, right? Where often the market infrastructure, the institutional infrastructure, the policy infrastructure is not strong enough to support international private capital and give it the kind of confidence that it will get returns. And so that for me is increasingly, I think that's the big job in the world, is to mature what I call green market maturity in emerging economies, so that the limited amount of public money can crowd in the necessary amount of private money. Because the world is not going to solve climate change on public money. It needs to mobilize trillions of private capital. And so I think we need to pay more attention to the way that the public money leverages in or doesn't often today, and therefore needs to change private money.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that when in the last government, UK government, not report, when the Treasury committed more money to arms and to HS2 by a factor of 10 than to climate issues. And I think that is certainly going to change, and I think you do. Well, not. I don't think we 100% need private funding to come in, because that's where it is. I think the governments need to show a willingness and a pathway as well, which will then give, as you say, everybody will come align around the same goals and all go in the same direction.
Yeah, but you see, like, I mean, you do see government putting early stage R&D and sort of demonstrate project capital into some of the, green hydrogen, some of the CCS work, which still, we need to back every lever we've got. You also see the clarity on moving to electric vehicles. I mean, you just saw Shell said they'll build 50,000 chargers in the UK. I mean, they wouldn't be doing that if there wasn't a commitment to phase out combustion engines in 10 years. So I think that starts to be interesting, how the degree to which policy certainty alone creates the conditions for private capital to pile in. And that I think there's too much of a bifurcation between public money and private money in emerging markets, and also in the COP processes. That all you ever hear about is 100 billion, and it's understandable, it's iconic, it's a covenant of trust, as Alok Sharma says. But my argument is, while it's necessary, it is far from sufficient. And so only talking about 100 billion is a way of guaranteeing failure, actually. So we've got to talk about the 100 billion, deliver that, and talk about how do we create the conditions for I mean, the World Bank estimates $4 trillion a year in emerging and developing economies.
Yeah. I mean, we come across interesting businesses that are trying to push the envelope quite hard, and they want to fund it themselves. So, I mean, do you think that government will start looking at some kind of tax incentives for businesses that are sustainable, who do tick, who somehow get a certification program that they go, right, we're a B Corp, or you're Race to Zero certified, therefore there's a carrot versus a stick?
Well, I think capital markets generally, banks and asset managers are starting to factor in climate risk, transition readiness into their, so we've now got $90 trillion of assets in the Glasgow Finance Alliance for net zero, which is all committed to aligning its portfolios and its balance sheets with net zero, which means that if you haven't got a credible transition plan yourself, you're going to start finding it harder to hang on to shareholders, which means your share price is going to go down, which means you're going to lose your job if you're the CEO, and you're going to find it harder to borrow money, or you have to pay more money for it, which ultimately means you're either going to get with the program and have a credible plan, or you're going to pay for it, and ultimately that's not going to be good for business. So, but I think governments might start favouring in procurement, like many big multinationals do now, people with a credible plan. I don't know about a direct fiscal incentive. I mean, the fiscal incentives that governments tend to give are to incentivize the uptake of new technology, like contracts for difference on power is a familiar one. I think we'll see that on hydrogen, on storage. Lots of governments have been giving fiscal incentives to buy electric vehicles, and you can expect those to reduce until we reach the ticket price parity point. But I think those are the sort of instruments that governments are more likely to use. And yeah,
and obviously, one of the questions is the magic wand. I know COP is obviously it, but what would a magic wand be to come out of COP?
Well, COP isn't a magic wand. There is no magic wand. So I would just reject the premise of the question. Next question. Well, I think that's it. I mean, so what is the magic wand? I mean, there is no silver bullet. There's no single intervention. This is very complex. We're talking about restructuring the entire energetic basis of the global economy, and we probably need to go further than that in terms of addressing some of the distributional and inequity issues that make actually tackling climate change harder, because the politics of inequity intervenes. So it's really complex. I mean, we need to change policy, we need to change procurement, civil society needs to keep governments and businesses, needs to hold them to account. Capital markets need to not just passively shovel money around based on algorithms, but actually engage some intellect rather than some algorithmic optimization to figure out what the companies actually need to do to survive this transition and to provide the solutions that society needs. So I think we've lived through what I call the second great era of selfishness, with this rather silly idea that we could just leave markets to themselves and everything will be fine, and we're paying the prices for that in more than one way. And so industrial strategy is back in vogue. And when I was running my first factory in Manchester in the 1990s, industrial strategy in the UK was considered a communist plot, like central planning. Government should have no opinion, just leave the market to it. So as a result of that, most factories shut. Yeah. Most manufacturing was offshored. Now all governments realise the UK government has a department of energy and industrial strategy. That's how much it's changed. Governments have realised that unless you steer the market in the direction you want, not plan it, but steer it with these kind of long-term targets and the kind of incentives to develop markets, then you just give away all competitiveness to countries who are a bit more interventionist. So it's a fine balance to strike between. No, I don't think it's a fine balance to strike. Central planning is an entirely different thing, but I think that was the problem for maybe 30 years. Some governments decided that it was folly to try and steer markets at all, and those governments mostly presided over massive job exports. And now people are realizing that for governments, this is not primarily a green thing, an ethical thing, an environmental thing. It's a competitiveness issue. If you want jobs and healthy economies, then you need to be building the industries that are delivering the zero carbon future. And and thank God, right? Because then enlightened self-interest can help drive this. Imagine if it was the other way around. If none of that was true, if the solutions to climate change didn't generate jobs and didn't generate wealth, then we'd be in a much darker place, because we'd be in a misalignment of incentives. So the good news is we've got a win-win here.
So the answer to the magic wand is an alignment of belief systems, finance, government, people to all go in the same direction. And it sounds like if we can get HR, manufacturing, social value, the will is there. It sounds like that would be a sensational result coming out of COP, because basically we want.
Yeah, and so you're right. Okay, yes, if I had a magic wand and I could align all those things in Glasgow, that would be Dumbledore-esque magic, right? At the top of the. I think. So you know what I mean when I say there's no magic wand. There's no. It's messy, right? It's societal and economic and systems change, and so there's all sorts of forces of resistance, and every sector and every country goes at different paces at different times. But yeah, the magic one is aligning. And the good news is we have massive alignment around net zero as the end goal. Yeah. We have some people bullshitting about what it really means in terms of sort of silly attempts to try and hoodwink people and use offsets without changing anything. Yeah. But that's really good news. But basically, we have societal alignment on the end goal, and we increasingly have sectoral alignment on the pathway in the mid. And a lot of what we're doing is trying to get alignment and convergence on the 2030 goals, like getting to $1 a kilogram hydrogen, getting to 10% sustainable aviation fuel, which doesn't sound like much, but it's 1,000 times the 0.01% we had in 2020, or getting to 5% of international shipping being in zero carbon ships. Again, doesn't sound like much, but we're at zero right now. Yeah. So, and get the cost down so that in the 30s, those new technologies really can be deployed. And meanwhile, just hurry up on renewables and electrification of transport.
Yeah. I think the sense is that there's such a huge desire. I know from the networks that I belong to, people wanting to be in Glasgow, whether they've got tickets or not. I don't have a ticket and I'm going. So everybody wants to be there, and everybody wants to kind of show that they're doing the right thing. Um, Slightly different question. Building back better and having better industries, and I know, London is such a fabulous, amazing, incredible city that can lead in this space, and we need all cities to lead in this space. But staff and mobility of staff is quite a tricky one. How do we get I suppose, London to be an amazing city focused on this and be able to get the best and brightest in the world to get here? Do you think we'll be able to do that?
Well, I think so. I mean, was it Johnson said, and earlier Johnson, that he is tired of London, is tired of life. I mean, it's an amazing city, and actually it is a global centre of this transformation. If you look at so many of the amazing NGOs that have really been driving this change, CDP, the Climate Group, Carbon Tracker, Share Action, and through CDP, the Science Based Targets Initiative, and so many of the things that have really been driving change. And then the City of London, the Green Finance Institute, which Marie Thomas runs, is really, really innovative. Because Mark Carney, was Governor of the Bank of England, really, I think, structurally started the supervisory and systemic change, in terms of disclosure and all the work of the network and greening the financial system. That's all started in London, right? And so, and tons more. And of course, there's good stuff happening all over the world, but London really is a centre, and I think that, I'm on the advisory board at the Grantham Institute, and Martin Seeger at the Grantham Institute at Imperial started a master's program on finance for climate finance. I don't know the exact title. Several years ago, it's just blown them away, the level of enrollment. I mean, young people, smart young people, ambitious young people want to work on solving these problems.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting, right? Because that means the best talent is being attracted. So I think that the firms and the organisations that are really committed. I think PwC are hiring 100,000 new staff, right? I spoke to the CEO of Deloitte. They have 335,000 staff worldwide. They hire 30,000 a year, and for all these big firms, two big reasons for them seriously ramping up their work in climate change. One is their clients need it,
yeah.
And two is they can't attract talent if they haven't got a really serious program. We have loads. Gonzalo and I built an amazing team, kind of half by sort of borrowing people from some of these amazing NGOs like CDP, like Climate Works in America, like WRI, like IUCN, have been really, really generous in giving us real content knowledge so we can glue together an ecosystem and drive that convergence. And then half from private sector organisations whose staff, really want to work at the heart of the transformation in this role in COP. So we've had just amazing. We've got an amazing team, like so talented, so hardworking, and so collaborative, right? So really, when you're talented and hardworking, but it's sort of selfish, it leads to really all sorts of problems. But when it's mission driven, then it can drive amazing collaboration. And that's what we need. We just need more of that, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, but you and Gonzalo are the only two doing this. It feels like we need, a massive amount of people.
But we're not, right. We have this sort of unique UN platform, and we have hundreds of partners in the Marrakesh Partnership who are all, I've just been, whether it's the World Resources Institute or the World Business Council for Sustainable Development or the Mission Possible Partnership. So there's collaborations within collaborations within collaborations. It's so there's a lot of people, and I think we're learning how to collaborate better. Yeah. But I mean, both not-for-profits who've often in the past been slightly sharp-elbowed and duplicative, and for-profits who've often overswallowed the mantra that all we need to do is compete, forgetting that actually most of human life is more about collaboration and competition. So I think we're relearning to calibrate when to compete and when to collaborate to thrive. And that's quite, I think for me, that's exciting because that's quite a big cultural shift from an era of selfishness and atomization, I think.
That's brilliant. Relearning when to collaborate and when to compete. I mean, that's that's what's going to make the world go around. Genius. Last question. Podcast. I know, obviously, outrage and optimism. It's mandatory for everybody that works for me. That's genius. Other podcasts, other books, things that you recommend we should all be listening to.
I don't have a lot of time for podcasts. I don't mean I don't have a lot of time for them. I don't mean that in the pejorative sense. I mean, I've just never got into the habit of listening to podcasts. I'm more of a reader. Outrage and optimism is the obvious exception to that rule, and it's partly because I think Paul, Christiana, and Tom are all individually brilliant, but there's some really lovely magic that they weave together, which manages to combine sort of Christiana's cheekiness and Tom's wizardry. He is a wizard, and Paul's like totally unique mind, which sometimes seems mad, but it's just really magical the way it releases or sort of unleashes new thinking. I mean, constantly sort of challenging. I tell you that the other thing that I found really helpful still is, and it's not because I used to work there, is the We Mean Business weekly summary of progress that Robin Knight there does. It's just if you're ever feeling down about the state of the world, it's just like a very quick read. It's just a list of everything that's been announced and happened the previous week, and it's kind of every week it's mind blowing. Massive new companies committing to invest in things, governments changing, cities changing. I find that, and I guess if I want to get into more detail, then it's stuff from people like the Energy Transitions Commission, who've just been consistently fantastic. The Rocky Mountain Institute, and and then the slightly more on the sort of scientific side on Nature, like WRI and IUCN. I think. I mean, there's just a lot of very high quality work being done. I think one thing I'm really excited that we've been working with WRI or with Kelly, who's now running the Systems Change Lab as part of the Bezos Earth Fund, is we're doing a report on trying to look more at all these transitions through the lens of systems change and what kind of cost down curves and exponential curves, not just how far have we gone, but taking more of a dynamic. And I hope we'll do that again next year, and we'll do it this year, it'll be good. We'll do it next year, it'll be much better, and we hope that's going to be a contribution to the global stocktake to take more of a systems change approach to how change actually happens and how we can drive it.
And that's the WRI, or is that has one?
Well, I don't know. To be honest, I think that'll be WRI, Bezos, and Climate Champions will probably be the badges on it. But the other thing that I'm really excited about is the really high quality, what some people call science fiction, some people call speculative fiction, some people call fly now. I mean, we've been really inspired by Kim Stanley Robinson's book, The Ministry for the Future, which, if you haven't read it, is, I mean, amazing. Both in terms of it sort of shocking slap in the face, this is how really bad things are, but also in kind of credible, messy, human meandering towards a robust solution. So it's a wonderful read. Anyone who's working in climate change, who knows anything about the Paris Agreement, it's incredibly well researched, very credible, and actually we're collaborating with Stan to bring some creativity, some what I would call robust use of the imagination into the COP. So we've got a climate imagination project, and we have 4 climate imagination fellows who are all brilliant young authors using the sort of speculative fiction approach to try and imagine how we might emerge from the mess we've created for ourselves. And they all happen to be young women. One from Mexico, one from Nigeria, one from India, and one from China. So they'll all be in Glasgow, as will Stan. So that, and they're all writing stuff right now. So really looking forward to some constructive provocation from the world of the imagination,
and from 4 very different parts of the world. So
yeah.
That'll be fascinating. So I have not read Ministry for the Future, but I will download it immediately.
Yeah, that's it's really. I mean, and my only advice to you and other readers is, it does get better after the first chapter. I don't mean the first chapter is brilliantly written, but really, really harrowing. Yeah. So that's the nearest I'll give you to a spoiler. It's really compelling. I think it's fantastic.
That is absolutely sensational, Nigel. I think the relearning when to collaborate and when to compete is such an awesome takeaway. Businesses need to collaborate more, as you know, hence this, and we want to collaborate more. We've just got to be aligned and have our USPs at the margin, I think, versus trying to. Yeah,
I've been thinking a lot about this and why we lost the ability. I think it's because in a lot of industries, actually, disruptive change is really infrequent. So you can just compete at the margins, effectively. Yeah. But in some industries, disruption is really frequent, and so they're the ones who've learned or not lost this art of collaboration. And I think the poster child for that is the mobile telephony industry. Everyone's vaguely aware that there's something called 5G that we're migrating to. No one really knows what it is, except it's better than 4G. And the industry's already defined 6G and is working on a definition of 7G. But that is one of the most competitive industries in the world, right? I mean, they're brutally competitive with each other, and yet they've, as an industry, agreed a roadmap for technical development, which has allowed the whole sector to thrive. So that's the interesting thing. You have, non-zero sum thinking. So you have much more expansive, generous thinking that actually, if we collaborate, this will be good, or at least create the possibility of being good for everybody. But and then we'll compete. And if you're not as good as me, I'll sweep up. But just being able to do both requires some real wisdom, I think. I mean, in life too, right? When do you collaborate? When do you compete? I mean, just generally speaking, those sort of. If we go by, if you always collaborate, you get shafted. If you always compete, then people cut you out of deals some real. It's like everything in life, right? The only things that matter require wisdom and Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about my old life in banking. I mean, at the headline level, if they can all agree on a roadmap and collaborate, and then at the lending level, then you're competing. You're going to release trillions of dollars of cash into a willing market. That's brilliant. Nigel, I know you are massively busy. I am very, very grateful for being able to squeeze into your diary. Fascinating. I will be putting this into a book, which I'll hopefully be able to give to you in person in Glasgow. I'll be on the other side of the fence, so I'll have to hand it.
Thanks so much. I really look forward to that. And I'm not so busy now. It's just late. It's because I'm in Korea, so it's nearly 10. So I'm going to stop now.
Yeah,
thanks a lot. I look forward to hopefully seeing you in Glasgow.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Take care. Bye.